So Alan, you're here in Birmingham, SEC meetings, worked out where we could spend some time right here in the Influencer headquarters. And, first off, when you walk in, everybody's looking around like they're wondering what team you play for. I'm sure you get that a lot. Like could you still go out there and hit, 20 home runs?
There's no way. I was actually out at baseball practice 2 days ago, and Coach Thompson's like, "This is the last group. You can get in here and hit some balls if you want." I'm like, "No, I like to remember when I was good."
Well, let's talk about that. You played sports growing up. You end up realizing a dream to play college and pro baseball. And that's a big part of your story now as a leader in college sports. So when did the dream as a young boy, young man, really start to make you feel like it could be a reality?
Yeah, well, before I answer that, Jim, I want to thank you for having me on. I know you and I have gotten a chance to get to know each other over this past year and a half or so, and I really respect what you do and the way you're able to amplify the messages. So we need people like you in our industry, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I probably, when I was about 10 years old, is probably when I started thinking about what I wanted to do when I grew up, and the lifelong dream of mine was to play Major League Baseball. And fortunately, as a young person, I played baseball, basketball, football, and soccer growing up. And as I got older and in my high school years, it kind of just narrowed down the focus down to basketball and baseball. And finally, I settled on baseball being the sport that I wanted to pay most of my attention to.
And you end up excelling enough to be able to go to Notre Dame.
I did, yeah. It wasn't something I intended to do. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't have like that dream school. Notre Dame wasn't really even on my radar. In fact, I thought you had to wear a suit and tie to school at Notre Dame. Thankfully you don't, and you didn't, and you still don't.
And now you can do that every day.
And now I got to do it every day, so it catches up with you at some point in time. But it was, having some vision and some dreams about where you want to go really helps you think about today and what you want to do today to get better.
No doubt. So you go to Notre Dame, you end up, it's amazing when you think about the brands that you played for. You go from Notre Dame to the Yankees.
Yeah.
I mean, the standards in sports to a degree, right? National fan bases. But what was that feeling like? You realize a lifelong dream, you get drafted by the New York Yankees.
Right. It probably goes back to high school. I went to O'Day High School, which is an all-male Catholic high school, all of maybe 500 students, but the brand in Seattle was that an academic powerhouse and an athletic powerhouse. So going from my high school to Notre Dame was really not that much different in terms of the academic brand, in terms of the athletic brand, and then obviously getting into the Yankees organization, I seem to have been a part of programs and brands where you kind of either love them or you hate them. And usually the reason why people hate them is because of all the success. And so it wasn't, in fact, I will tell you this, one of the greatest experiences that I had playing minor league baseball was, being on the road and having someone boo you, and that means that you've been successful. And so just a really great experience in the Yankees organization, and I wouldn't trade that for the world.
So you get done playing, and I know a lot of guys who I played with when it comes to college baseball get a chance to play pro ball. It wears you down. It's, in college you're playing 56 games. All of a sudden now you're playing 100 games. You're not traveling luxuriously. You're not making a ton of money. I've heard all the stories.
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, I'm done and I want to move on. Mm-hmm. Was college athletics the first thing that came to your mind?
No, it actually wasn't. The first thing, I don't know what came to my mind, because sport is such a huge part of athletes' identities, and particularly if you get a chance to play professional sports, you've basically been playing a sport since you were 5 or 6 years old. And so for 20 years, I've known baseball. I've known other sports, but I've known baseball, and I've identified myself as a baseball player. One of the first things my father said to me when I got done playing pro ball was, "Don't do anything stupid." Because you're searching for yourself, you're trying to find this new identity, and he just didn't want me to do something stupid. I don't know what I would have done, but I'm sure I could have come up with a couple of things if left enough time. But I didn't know if I wanted to get into investment banking. I didn't know if I wanted to I didn't really even fully understand that there was a career in college athletics. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself, and it just took me a little bit of time to figure that out.
What was the catalyst to get you into college athletics?
I joke, but it's in all sincerity. I got into this industry because of me being very selfish. And I remember so I was back in South Bend working for a small web development company, and I would always stop back by the baseball stadium to watch practice or games on my way home from work. And
wow,
yeah,
you missed it that
well, just you miss the guys.
Yeah, the guys.
Like you miss the guys, you
sure.
miss your coaches, you miss that camaraderie that you've been so accustomed to for so much of your life. And there was two guys in suits standing along the third base line, and I knew they worked in the athletics department. I didn't really know what they did. I just knew they were athletic department employees. And I knew them, they knew me, so we exchanged, hellos. And I kind of said, Notre Dame's a football school, so why are y'all out here watching a baseball game? And they said, well, we're supporting our student athletes in our baseball program. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I thought to myself, well, I do that too. But yet y'all are getting paid for it, and I just do it because I love it. And so that kind of was my entrance into wanting to work in this industry. And then shortly thereafter, after interacting with the student athletes, you quickly realize that you literally are there to support other people. And it's not about the gratification you get for yourself, it's about the reward you get for seeing someone else develop.
So talk me through your first few years in college athletics, because obviously a lot of people listening work in sports, and like nights, weekends, it's crazy. And when you're first getting started, you're not gonna make a ton of money. Right. Hopefully you don't have a big family yet and a bunch of responsibilities, right? Because if you do, it's gonna be tough to balance it all. And people deal with that whole work-life balance thing in any line of work, but college athletics is intense. So talk me through your first few years, and then when you started to see a path toward being an athletic director and started to maybe dream for that.
That's a really good question, Jim. I think that going into it, my first 2 years, I was in compliance. And so I was doing a lot of rules education. Although I had that experience while I was a student athlete, I hadn't done it from the other side of the table. And so helping and interacting with student athletes was the best part of the job. I interacted with student athletes every day. But it is a grind, right? It's nights, it's weekends, it's doing whatever you have to do to get the job done. And that, in order to do it successfully, you have to sacrifice other things in your life. And so some of that's your personal life. My wife and I we had just gotten married, and so we were starting our lives together. Had a child in the first year, working in professional or in college athletics, and that was just you have to start to choose, where your priorities are. And I'm so thankful that my wife has been so supportive. Christy has been my biggest champion, and without her understanding the things that I need to do professionally, I wouldn't be where I am today. And you can't underestimate, or I shouldn't say that, you can't undervalue a partner who gets your world, because there is no work-life balance. I mean, you are tied to your job, and your own personal success and your organization's success is completely tied to the work that you do. And so whether the phone call comes in at 10 o'clock at night or 6 a.m. in the morning, and you may be able to take your kids to school, but yet you gotta be on the phone on the way there. Or you have to break off a meeting, or you can't make it to a kid's game or whatever. And you try to do the best you can to navigate those, but if there's a jump ball, right, the job is gonna get the possession.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and I think being an entrepreneur is similar, because you're just always on, but there's also a lot of people depending on you, especially in the seat you're in today, right? Not just your family, but your team and their families. And for you, student athletes, and we look at our athlete users the same way, but we're not tied to them as much as you are in your position. So that's a big weight that you've obviously been lifting and getting used to carrying, but fast forwarding all the way to how you look at your role today, your wife must be patient and very understanding to know that many people are depending on you.
Sure, it is, and she is. Christy is incredibly patient. It would be, in order to articulate this accurately, it is frustrating for her, and it's frustrating for me. I've seen, my son has played, 5 soccer games, and I've only seen one of them. and I've missed every one of them. My daughters, I miss some of their games. I miss some of their events at school at night. And so you take these jobs knowing that it's not a normal lifestyle, but you do it because you love it. You love shaping people's lives. And so, in quote, a normal job, my responsibility is to 3 kids, right, and my wife. In this role, I got, right, there's 550 student athletes. You've got 300 and so full-time staff. You've got fans who are incredibly passionate about their school and their teams, and you're responsible for all of those things. And it's they're very challenging, very demanding jobs because so many people have opinions on what they think you should do and how you should do it. But that's part of the allure of intercollegiate athletics, and you got to love it.
So your rise up. You've got, you're married, you're building a family. You talked about the support you have there from Christy. Then you're working for these different brands, and one brand I want to ask you about that you played a big role with, and I work with them at INFLCR a lot, is Ole Miss. I was just there a few weeks ago, and they were talking you up and talking about the days when you were there. Danny White was there, and I was talking to Kyle Tucker, actually, who's been there, it seems like forever. Yeah. And whether it's that journey at Ole Miss or some of the other schools you were at along the way, talk about some people who took you under their wing and helped you get to where you ended up at Buffalo, where you became the athletic director.
Well, you said a key word, and that's journey. It is a journey, and the journey isn't always pleasant. But if you can find a way to have the journey somehow be rewarding, then you're in a great spot. Danny and I, spent a lot of time together at Ole Miss, and we had a lot of fun. There was a lot of hard work, but because we are so different, our ideas would clash, which was great, and usually magic would come out of it. And I think that's why we were able to have success there. The interim AD at Ole Miss right now, Keith Carter, all 3 of us worked together and felt that we really kind of did something magical there to help Ole Miss really achieve some cool things that Ole Miss hadn't achieved before. There's a lot of other people in this industry who have been just stalwarts who lend an ear, and people who I can call on and just say, hey, here's a situation I'm going through. I know you've gone through it before. How did you handle it? What are some things I need to be thinking about? Give me a different perspective. Is my thought process appropriate? Just having people hold you not accountable, but just kind of keeping the checks and balances there. And I'm sure you have to do the same thing, right? As you're in your own company, as the leader of this organization. There are other people who have been successful in their businesses. Those same people have failed in businesses, and you can learn a lot from their experiences. And we in this industry are no different.
Give me an example of a Danny White, Allen Greene clash that turned into a great thing.
It was usually something political. I'll tell you one. Well, I won't tell you in detail. He and I have very different approaches. We want the same outcome, but different approaches. And there was a time when one of our coaches wanted to give a raise to someone on staff. And Danny's like, yeah, of course we'll do it. And then I'm saying, well, why? We weren't successful. So why does someone get a raise and they're not successful? And we had these back and forths about being in the foxhole with a coach, and trying to do all you can to provide coaches within your bounds, within your means, provide them the things that they feel like are necessary for their program. And we ended up in the same spot. I understood where he was coming from.
Sure.
I just happen to disagree.
Yeah.
Now that I've evolved, I do understand why those are some things that you do.
The reason I bring it up is I think leadership teams are obviously what guide a brand, a company, a athletic department, and the magic of a leadership team is not meetings becoming, oh, I got this other meeting again. We all know that attitude that can come out of meetings that everybody knows the leader's just gonna talk the whole time, and this guy's gonna do this, and this girl's gonna do this, and it's gonna be a disaster. Sure. But instead, a plan to create what I think is a healthy debate, where you're going head to head about key issues, but you're not doing it with pride. Your ego is checked at the door. You're doing it for the same purpose. Right. And to me, that's where the magic happens with meetings, leadership teams, and that's where brains are working together instead of against each other.
We talk a lot about, well, how can, help me understand, right? Or how can we? Because anytime that there is this new idea, there's going to be resistance, or there's going to be, oh, well, the problem with that is, like that is apparently human nature. And if we can somehow get ourselves to say, you know what, that's a really good idea. I know there's some flaws here, but I think we can work through them. How can we work through these things?
Yeah.
And if you can start to do that, then you can start to be solution oriented and actually make some progress in some stuff.
So you look up there at our core values, so we go back to them a lot, but be the solution is over there. That's the eighth one on the right. So that is something I've just learned in business. It has to be the attitude, because what's going to happen every day? Problems. You got to be a culture every day, multiple times a day. And before you know it, if you're not a solutions culture, little problems will feel like big problems. Right. Sometimes you just need perspective of, what are we here to do? Solve. We're also here, my company and Auburn University, for the same true north, and that's athletes. So just talk to me about how you approach, as a leader in college sports, how you've learned to approach putting the athlete first as the most important thing you do.
Wow, that's a good one. There's a colleague who I have learned through their coaches who is a very different person when they're managing the organization versus when they're around student athletes. And I didn't understand that until I got to Auburn. Taking jobs like Auburn, you talked about fires. We have 15 head coaches and 300 or so full-time staff members. There's fires every day. Someone has a problem every single day that they need your help with. And that wears on you, right? It completely just zaps your energy and your bandwidth. And I've noticed that I start to do that also. I start to deal with the daily operations of the department from a very business-minded place. When I'm around our student athletes, I notice I light up. And it just kind of happens that way. And so for those people who are really committed to the student athlete experience, those are the people who light up around their student athletes. And I find myself being energized when I'm around our young people. That's awesome. They bring a whole different element to the room, and it's one that I crave.
Yeah. Youth breeds creativity, energy, a lot of things that, as we get into the daily grind, we lose. That's awesome. It's cool that you're able to do that. You can walk right over to practice to do that, You need to, maybe you should plan that.
I think it was Monday. Monday I got 4 practices in. I started off at swimming. Maybe it was Tuesday, I don't even remember. Started off at swimming, went to men's basketball, went to baseball, and finished off with football.
That's awesome.
And that was the best afternoon I've had in a long time.
So Danny goes up to Buffalo and says, hey, come with me.
Yeah, so this leads to another conversation. So Danny and I had conversations about just our career path and professional development. And Danny wanted to be an AD, right? He knew that's what he wanted. And we would have conversations, and I didn't have that same, not confidence. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an athletic director. And I said, but if I'm going to be one, I can't do it just by having compliance and development experience. I have no idea how an athletic department is run. I have no idea on what these fires are every day that come up. And he got the job at Buffalo, he took me along. Not because I was experienced, but because we had gone through the battles together, and we had developed a level of trust that he knew I was gonna tell him my thoughts. And I would challenge him in a way that would help us get to and help him get to a better solution, or the best solution possible. So it was a great experience, and I've shared with people. I had been at Notre Dame and I had been at Ole Miss. All the great brands. And I'm at Auburn, great brand. But the most rewarding and challenging and best experience from a professional level perspective that I had was the 6 years I spent at Buffalo. You wear multiple hats. Resources are a tremendous grind. There isn't as much fan affinity. You're working for everything that you get. And when you have success at that level, it's incredibly rewarding. At Auburn, everyone expects to have the success because we have the resources. There isn't an achievement that we shouldn't have. But at Buffalo, no one expects you to go right to the NCAA tournament in basketball. I've been to more NCAA tournaments at Buffalo in basketball than I have at Auburn, right?
Yeah.
And even after 2 years, I've had more experiences in the NCAA tournament at Buffalo than at Auburn. And so I developed tremendously as an administrator during the time at Buffalo because you have so many challenges to deal with that are not the same challenges at a place like Auburn.
That's awesome, man. And I'll tell you, as an upstate New Yorker, I mean, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. Buffalo is at one point for me growing up, I would get Buffalo and Buffalo State mixed up all the time. Buffalo obviously rose as a brand big time when they had some great college football years before you got there. But what you guys did is very impressive. And I'm sure there's a lot I don't know that you did with the athletic department, but I obviously saw basketball, saw football. It's an amazing story. And so he gets the UCF position, you get promoted, you're now the head guy, and you felt because of what you were helping him with when he was there, you were ready to roll?
Right. Well, I'd say, Danny was there for about 3 years, and every day I tried to figure out how to get him fired. That was my job. I'm like, how can I get this guy out of here? It worked out really, really well where he got an opportunity to go to UCF, and he's obviously killing it there. And I got an opportunity to stay at Buffalo and continue the positive trajectory that we'd had. One of the things I will share about the dynamics at Buffalo was I had 3 or 4 years to develop relationships on campus with university leadership, to develop relationships with our donors, to develop relationships with our coaches. And so if I wasn't the person to take over, then they were just looking for somebody completely different or someone brand new. So you can't lose sight, for those people who want to be ADs, you can't lose sight of cultivating the people who are on your own campus, because you never know when an opportunity might open up at your existing campus, or if a provost or a dean or somebody gets a job someplace else and it allows them to vouch for you at this new place. So never pass up an opportunity to develop relationships on your own campus.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what we preach at Influencer, especially to athletes, is be ready for the moment.
Right.
You never know when you're going to make a run to a Final Four.
Sure.
You never know when you're going to be in a moment that is going to have a lot of eyeballs on it because it's a special moment in sports. And of course, being ready with your social media is important. But you seem to really be ready for the moment where you got called down here to Auburn, Alabama for the interview. And I've heard the story like 10 different ways. I'll tell you the way I've heard it. Okay. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. What I heard was that Auburn called Danny and said that they were very interested in him coming to Auburn, being athletic director in the SEC. And he said, he's really committed to what he's building at UCF. It's where he wants to be the rest of his life. But you really need to give Allen Greene a call and see what he's doing up at Buffalo.
I would believe the first part. I wouldn't believe the second part. It's interesting. I do not know how my name made it into the search process.
And you were happy.
I was happy. The day before I got a phone call from the search firm, I was in my president's office talking about an extension. My wife and I had this long conversations about our family, our personal life, the kids, our community. Like, we loved our time at Buffalo.
Buffalo's a great city.
It's a great city.
Yeah.
And we did not want to leave.
It's kind of like Birmingham with 8 months of lake effect.
Exactly. It's exactly what it's like. It is a great city. And, we didn't want to leave. We weren't looking to leave. We certainly weren't looking to go to Auburn. Like, we'd already spent some time in Oxford, Mississippi. I'm from Seattle. She's from right outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah, right.
There was we weren't interested. I wasn't interested. And then I started getting an understanding of what Auburn was looking for, and someone was telling me, like, you're actually a really good fit down there. I'm like, but I don't check a whole bunch of boxes though. And it did. I mean, fortunately, it worked out where I fell in love.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you.
Yeah.
What boxes?
Well, so Auburn traditionally has hired someone from Auburn or with Auburn connections, right? Someone that doesn't have my nice chocolatey tan, and certainly not someone from Seattle, right? So there's these, in my opinion, 3 major boxes that I can't change.
Yeah.
And no matter what kind of lipstick you put on me, I'm still gonna be that pig.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate about the leadership at Auburn is they saw the things in me that made the fit work. And they took a chance on someone that was very much outside of the traditional profile. And so I owe it to Auburn University to do all I can to serve to the best I can for not just our student athletes, not just for our staff, not just for the people who work at Auburn, but for the entire Auburn family. And I am incredibly humbled by their display and their confidence in me to lead this department. And I will do so humbly, and I'll do all I can to make Auburn the best it can be.
So when you came down for that interview, you were kind of just like, it's an experience, it's, broaden my horizons, an SEC AD interview, whatever. Like, is that basically what your self-talk was? Did you really want it?
I wasn't interested in the job because it was in the SEC. I'd already been in the SEC.
Yeah, you already been
already
there.
Done it. I didn't want the job. I really did.
That's what I'm asking.
I was intrigued, and I tell the story when we're out on the road. I was intrigued, but I wasn't interested. I didn't become interested until the very first interview, which was in Atlanta. I fell in love with the people. Second interview in Atlanta, fell in love with the people. Signed a contract, then showed up in Auburn, Alabama, with my family the night before the press conference. I had never been to Auburn, Alabama before.
Why'd you sign the contract before that without going there?
Because I didn't need to go there.
You just knew what the job was, and you felt good. You felt at peace, and the people.
I felt comfortable. I felt at home with the people, and based on what I knew who I was, I could just be myself. And if I would just be myself at Auburn, I think there would be some chance for some success.
That's awesome. So
crazy is what it is.
It is crazy, but that's how.
Borderline stupid.
It's a big risk.
It is.
Big risk, but don't talk to me about risk. I love risk.
Right? They're all calculated.
All right, so you go to the press conference. Now, you talked about your complexion. You're the first African-American athletic director, not at Auburn, but in the league.
Third in the league. First at Auburn. Third in the league.
So first at Auburn, third in the league. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the other two things, being from the Pacific Northwest and not being in Auburn, man. Did any of that come back when you walked in the room and you walk out to do that press conference? Any like self-talk, pollute your mind?
I don't know. It was number one, it was a whirlwind. But when I was preparing for my remarks, it had nothing to do with my profile, in the sense that the things that I couldn't control. Right? So where I'm from, can't control. Being a person of color, can't control. Not being from Auburn, can't control those things. I approached it as, here's who I am. And if y'all accept me, then that's great. We're gonna have a lot of fun. If you don't accept me, then this ain't gonna work out. And we can both just go our separate ways. It didn't dawn on me that I was the first person of color to lead Auburn athletics until the night before. And I was kind of rehearsing talking points with some of the staff, and they were helping prep me with making sure I said Jordan-Hare Stadium, not Jordan-Hare Stadium, and just some of those nuances, right?
He's not an Auburn guy.
Yeah, it's not. Right. It's Auburn University, not University of Auburn. It's that's when I finally said, oh, I guess I am. Like it didn't cross my mind that I was the first one. It crossed my mind of, is being black and being able to lead Auburn athletics, will that be acceptable? Can people accept that? That's where my main concern was.
But the people who you fell in love with in Atlanta made you feel like they had accepted it, and that empowered you.
Yeah. So the experience at Ole Miss, my wife and I went to Ole Miss prior to accepting the job. And the questions I had was, how comfortable are you with a person of color out asking for money to support Ole Miss athletics with people who we know did not approve of integration? In the early 60s, those same people who I was calling on, right in Jackson and in Memphis and in the Delta and down the coast, those are the same people who went to school at Ole Miss in the late 50s and early 60s. And the response that Pete Boone shared with me, and I'll never forget this, he said, "We wouldn't have you down here if we didn't think you'd be successful." Wow, and that was deep, like that hit me. And so part of the conversations that we had with the people at Auburn felt the same way. They would not have had me engaged in this opportunity if they didn't feel like I could be successful.
And that'll make you feel a certain way.
It makes you feel good.
Right? Yeah, right. That'll give you presence. Yeah. It's kind of like your parents or your wife telling you,
it's like your
encouraging you.
Yeah, and it's like your coach, like your basketball coach, putting you on the line to shoot, a 1-on-1 at the end of the game. That your coach has confidence that you're gonna knock him down.
Yeah.
Your knees may be knocking like crazy, right? But your coach believes in you, your players believe in you, your teammates believe in you, and therefore you've got confidence going into a situation that could be potentially pretty damn frightening.
You get in there and there's a lot of work to do right away, especially from a people standpoint, because let's face it, like the reality is like anything else, the only way you can be successful is having the right people, culture fit, core values, the things that really make up the DNA of an organization. So you had to get the org chart, so to speak, right? And we're not talking about a 30-person org chart, we're talking about a 300-person org chart. And then you had to obviously think about all the things you think about in college athletics to transcend the value down through the student athlete experience. What are some of the things you approach right away and are still working on as part of your vision for Auburn?
Well, the first thing, so right after the press conference, I ended up having a chance to speak to the entire athletic department. And at that point in time, we talked a little bit about professional values, but I talked about my personal values. And I wanted them to get to know me as a person, not Allen Greene the guy, not Allen Greene the AD. And I did also talk a little bit about, here's what I expect from a professional, from people who are gonna work in this organization. So that way we start kind of laying the foundation of, here are my non-negotiables. And don't be late, be respectful, be a team player, those types of things. Then it's really just working to understand the university, understand the athletics department, the university, the culture. It's hard to make decisions if you don't understand the culture and some of the history, the backstory. We can all talk about the future all we want, but if you don't look in the rearview mirror, then you're going to make a mistake going forward. We know that history repeats itself, but how can we repeat the good part of history, the part of history that helps us advance, that helps with our brand, and acknowledge the history that may not have been the best history, but use it to our advantage moving forward. And then trying to figure out who I needed to be. Like, I know who I am, but what type of athletic director do I need to be, and who do I need around me to be able to fill my gaps? There's some things that I do really, really well, and then there's some things I'm terrible at. And so I gotta have people around me who can hide my blemishes and help accentuate the things that I'm good at.
That's the key. Talked about brand, we've said it a lot. Obviously, we're partnered. Auburn's actually our second ever client. Kentucky's our first, and we learned a ton as a team with our product from our early days with Auburn a couple of years ago. But since you've come on, we've been able to help a lot more sports, women's sports, and really have a holistic partnership with you. And so I think for me, it's refreshing knowing that from the top down, Auburn's really thinking about their brand. Matter of fact, brand is a part of the hashtag this year for the football team, right? For the brand.
Ride for the brand.
Ride for the brand. So for you, how do you look at branding, especially as it goes to social media, the student athlete experience, because it's a big part of what you guys are doing?
Growing up, your parents teach you don't judge a book by its cover. And we wish that could be true, right? It's not true. People do judge books by their covers. And so it's incredibly important that our student athletes understand that they represent Auburn. And they represent their teams, they represent their coaches, they represent the administration, they represent university leadership. They represent the Auburn family. And in order for Auburn's brand to remain shiny, then our young people who represent us have to make sure that they're operating, behaving in accordance with really the Auburn creed, right? And understanding that their actions are a direct reflection of the people who came before them, whether it's their student athletes or whether it's people who just went to school at Auburn or people who are passionate about the university. And understanding that and being able to demonstrate maturity in the face of adversity, incredibly important. Being able to win with humility, incredibly important. Being able to step into any situation with confidence, incredibly important. Those are some of the characteristics that the Auburn family really appreciates, and we need to make sure that our student athletes are espousing those character traits.
And so when it comes to, you mentioned book by its cover, I talk to athletes all the time about the fact that whether you like it or not, social media has become your digital character footprint. Right. You know, if Aaron Boyd, who I just hired, he played, he was a student athlete, wide receiver at Kentucky. When he applied to work for our team, what's the first thing I looked at? You know what I mean? His social media. And so when a front office executive is evaluating a young man, he's not just going to look at his 40 time, he's going to look at his social media, his Twitter, what's he about? Right. So this is the reality of the society we live in today, and it can be used for good. It can be a weapon of mass production, absolutely, or it can be a weapon of mass destruction. Right. And with 500 plus student athletes and some coaches, that's a big liability.
It is. Again, that goes to the foundation of the culture, right? And so you think about making sure that there are behaviors that drive the culture, and using it for, what did you call it? What was the first one? Mass production, right? So if we can get people to understand, you've got a choice. You're straddling the line. You can choose to use your influence for positive, or you can choose to use your influence for negative. Coach Malzahn talks about use your influence for positive, and being able to have our student athletes put themselves in a positive light speaks to their own personal brand. Oh, yeah. Because we all know that we may have negative thoughts in our minds about any sort of issue or topic or feeling, but we also probably have some positive thoughts on it too. So let's deal with the negative stuff separately and privately, and make sure that the positive stuff is out there being mass produced. Yeah.
And even in a situation like this past weekend, obviously not the outcome that Auburn wanted, but seeing guys still tell their story and maybe bring some of the lowlights with transparency to their audience, Derek Brown being one of them, it gives people a look inside. Hey, we can win this way, but we can lose with dignity too, and we ain't done yet.
You know, it's funny. 18 to 22-year-olds, right? They're not professional athletes. Right. They're our kids, right? And so they're not perfect. No one is. They try really hard, which is what we all expect. But they also understand that in order to achieve any sort of success, you have to have some failure. The two go hand in hand. Yeah. You can't just have all success, right? The stock market is one. It's unrealistic to expect returns every day. Right. There's going to be some dips. There's going to be a recession. Yeah. You're going to climb back up. But over the long haul, you're going to be net positive. Right. And when we think about the long haul of the stock market and the long haul of a young person's life, we want them to just grow. We know that there's going to be ups and downs. That's a part of it. If we can reduce the volatility, that's even better. But the chances are, and you think about those people who have either failed in a business or they failed in something in their personal life, if they can use that experience to help them grow and help them learn and help them do something even better or try it again but try it a different way, then that's fantastic.
It's the Tony Bennett speech. Yeah. You remember the Tony Bennett speech? Here's the UMBC ticket. Mm-hmm. Here's the national championship ticket. Right. It took this
to get that.
To get this.
Yeah. The tough part is we all get caught up in the moment of the UMBC, right? And the Terriers, I think, or something like that.
Well, actually, the tough part is I'm giving you an example. We also get caught up in the semifinal from this
that's true too, right? But you think of Virginia. You think of Virginia last year, and that is a prime example that they used that negative experience and they turned it into something positive.
It's beautiful, man. And there's so many parallels in life that you see with your kids, that you see as we get older. We see it because we're parents, because we get a chance to be blessed to lead some people, because we have goals ourselves, and we've just gone through the reality that everything you put on your vision board ain't gonna happen like you think it will.
Right.
But it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a vision board.
Right.
But you may fall short on some things, and you can use that to get to somewhere else you never thought you'd go.
I've struck out 4 times.
Yeah.
It made me a better baseball player.
Yeah.
You know?
Bryce Brown. So had a chance to catch up with Bryce a few different times. Hung out with him at NBA Summer League. Sharp young man, really on a journey right now to make it to the league. You probably saw I signed that deal recently with the Celtics. And I know he was celebrating the ring on campus for the Mississippi State game. It was cool seeing all those guys back together. But he's a guy who talked about his journey at Auburn and what it means to be an Auburn man from his perspective. We did an interview, and he talked about the leadership. He talked about you. He talked about Coach Pearl, and the fact that he is an 18-year-old when he gets there, and he needed to grow up, and he needed somebody to be patient with him, but also hold him accountable. And he felt like the Auburn environment did that for him. What's it like for you to hear that, and then see his story?
And it almost makes me want to cry, because that's why we do what we do, is for those moments. We talked earlier about dealing with fires every day, multiple. And as I've shared with some of my colleagues, I'll deal with fires every day to have one of those experiences that Bryce Brown has had. To know that's an impact that we're having makes all the other stuff worth it.
And that team, it's a special team.
Oh, there's no question.
What was that like for you?
It was so much fun to watch them. There was 2 things. It was fun to watch them gel, and you could see it happening, particularly once we got to Nashville for the SEC tournament. It was just different. It was fun to see our fans celebrate. People don't necessarily care how the sausage is made. They just want a good breakfast. And it's fun to be behind the ropes and see how the sausage is made. And it's fun to watch those young men develop and grow into being teammates. And what we saw out of the basketball season last year is that the culture is what helped us get as far as we got. It wasn't the talent.
Yeah.
There were teams who we played who were a heck of a lot more talented than us.
I just loved, my favorite part about the team was like the attitude they had going into North Carolina game was almost like Bryce said, they really thought they were going to beat us. Like in that, we took that personally. Like they took it personally that anybody would doubt them. And they believed in each other so much that if somebody was off, somebody else would pick that person up. And they had that, like you said, camaraderie, they gelled. To the point where the year before they were much more successful in the regular season, but the year after, less successful regular season, but a conference championship and a run to the Final Four. It's just an amazing thing, team. All right, so as we wrap up, talking leadership, we've talked about a lot of this already, but if you're to talk to a fellow leader, high level, and you give them one big piece of advice when it comes to hiring and developing the best talent, what would you say?
It's not hiring and developing the best talent, it's hiring and developing the best people.
I like it. And how do you do that, knowing that you're just getting to know a person 1 or 2 times?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I don't know.
Is it gut feeling? Is it
like in terms of if knowing that person is the right fit for your organization? You mean? You can. I hope that I can get a sense of someone, and I guess you ask some questions and some open-ended questions to see where people go. And if you and whoever you're interviewing, both of you are nodding along, and then you got some magic starting to brew. Always be who you are. Always be who you are. Don't try to be someone who you're not. The end result is not a good outcome, regardless, because you can only fake it for so long.
Right.
So be who you are, and if you're not a right fit for a particular organization, so be it. That's okay. So what? There will be an organization who is looking for someone with your skill set, right? With your characteristics, where you can thrive. And I think that's a really difficult thing for people to accept. I had a hard time accepting it when my first AD job that I interviewed for, they went with somebody else. And I'm like, but I'm better than that person. Or at least I think I'm better than that person. But the people in the organization who interviewed, all 5 people or whatever, knew that the person who they hired was going to be the best fit for what it is that they needed. And now that I'm more mature and I've gone through it a couple of times and missed a couple of times, you're like, okay, it makes sense. It's not personal. I mean, it's personal, but it's not personal.
It's not. Yeah. It's not a vendetta.
Right.
Gotta have the right fit.
You gotta have the right fit. If you go someplace and you're not the right fit, you're not gonna be successful. So why do it to yourself?
All right, so this new Will Smith movie, he's there, and then they got the clone of him, right? So let's pretend, same thing, Allen Greene today.
Where do you come up with these questions?
I'm making this up. So Allen Greene today gets to go to Notre Dame baseball practice with the Allen Greene that just got done playing minor league ball. He's working for a web development company, and talk to him and give him advice. What do you say to young Allen Greene? He's sitting next to him. They're out there playing baseball.
Wow.
Time for a pretty long conversation.
Lots. Don't worry about the noise. Don't worry about people around you. Don't worry about all the distractions. Just serve and be kind to other people and care about your teammate.
Yeah. Serving is always the thing that it comes back to with leadership and success, isn't it?
It is.
Because when we're inward, we're never fulfilled.
No. Like you just.
But when we're outward, you have that moment like you said you almost got emotional about Bryce, right? Mm-hmm. That's outward. Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing how that works?
It's rewarding.
It's rewarding. Family, your team.
Yeah. That's the unique part, right? You and I think we know this as humans. Material things don't make people happy, right? Money doesn't buy happiness. We know these things. So don't fight it. Don't try to make a whole bunch of money just so you can buy a whole bunch of stuff. That's not gonna make you happy. It's false. Be around people who you care about and who care about you, and that's what makes you happy. There was I don't know what I was watching. There was like what would you do, but something that someone tried to buy a homeless person's dog, and they said, okay, I gave you $25 for your dog, and it got up to $1,000, and the person's like, there's no amount of money that you can give me to buy my dog. This is my friend. That $1,000 could have paid rent. It could have done something, but it goes to show how important relationships are, and how invaluable. There is no value on relationships. There's value on cars. There's value on clothes, but there is no value on relationships.
No doubt, man. I love it. Man, I really enjoyed this. I appreciate it. You're telling me how early you guys left this morning. I know you got to get back to your family and probably watch a few practices for all I know.
I wish. There's a dinner tonight.
Oh, is there?
Yep. So we got one more function before you head back.
One more function before you head back. Well, thank you for making time with me today. We really appreciate our partnership with Auburn. Influencer is bullish on the Tigers and all that's happening. So we appreciate you.
Well, we appreciate you. You're having an impact on our student athletes, and at the end of the day, that's what's really, really important to us.
No doubt.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.